I've been driving trains on the underground for 7 years. 7 years of tunnels and platforms and fluorescent lights. 7 years of the same routes, the same stations, the same automated announcements echoing through empty carriages. And in those 7 years, I've learned things they don't tell you in training, things they don't put in the safety manual, things the other drivers know but won't talk about. Not officially, not on record. But we talk about them in the break room at 3 a.m. when it's just us and the hum of the vending machines and the knowledge that we've all seen something we can't explain. We trade warnings, unwritten rules, the kind of knowledge you only get from spending too many nights alone in the tunnels, watching the darkness between stations and wondering what's watching you back. My name is Danny Cole. I drive the Northern Line, night shifts, mostly, 11 p.m. till 6 a.m. It's the shift no one wants, which means it's the shift they give to people who've been around long enough to know better than to ask questions. Last week, something happened on my route, something I can't report, something I can't explain. But I can warn you, because if you ever find yourself on a late night train and the lights start flickering in a pattern and the driver makes an announcement that doesn't sound quite right, you need to know what to do. You need to know the warnings, and you need to understand why we all follow them. This is everything they don't tell you about working the underground, because this is what happens in the spaces between stations, and this is why I'm handing in my resignation tomorrow. I started working for Transport for London in 2018. I've always liked trains, something about the rhythm of them, the way they move through the city like blood through veins, keeping everything alive and moving. It felt important, necessary. The training took 6 months, classroom sessions, simulator runs, supervised shifts with experienced drivers who'd been doing this for 20 to 30 years. Most of the training was what you'd expect: safety protocols, emergency procedures, how to handle delays, signal failures, passenger incidents. But there was one session, towards the end of training, maybe week 23 or 24, that stood out. It was led by a man named Frank Holloway. He'd been driving for 36 years, grey hair, deep-set eyes, hands that shook slightly when he wasn't holding a coffee. He stood at the front of the room and looked at the 8 of us sitting there, 8 trainees, young and eager and stupid, and he said something I've never forgotten. Most of what you've learned in this training will keep you safe, but there are things that happen on the underground that aren't in the manual, things we don't talk about officially, things you'll learn from experience if you last long enough. One of the other trainees, a kid named Jason, cocky, always asking questions, raised his hand. What kind of things? Frank looked at him for a long moment. The kind of things that make you quit, he said. No one laughed. Frank reached into his bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, photocopied, the kind of copy that's been copied so many times the text is barely readable. He handed it to the person in the front row, a woman named Claire, and told her to pass it around. This is a list, Frank said. Warnings from drivers who've been doing this longer than most of you have been alive. You don't have to believe them, you don't have to follow them, but if you're smart, you'll keep a copy, just in case. The paper made its way around the room. When it reached me, I unfolded it and read it. There were 8 warnings, handwritten, some in different handwriting, like they'd been added over time by different people. I read it twice, then folded it back and put it in my pocket. Jason laughed. This is a joke, right? Like a hazing thing? Frank didn't smile. I hope you never find out, he said. I still have that piece of paper. It's in my wallet right now, folded in a small square, the creases worn soft from being opened and closed too many times. I've looked at it more times than I can count, especially in the last week. Here's what it says. Warning 1. If you see someone standing on the tracks between stations, do not stop the train. Do not slow down. Do not look at their face. Warning 2. If the lights in the cabin flicker 3 times in a row, check your mirrors immediately. If you see a passenger in the reflection that isn't there when you turn around, do not acknowledge them. Keep driving. Warning 3. If you receive a signal to stop at a station that isn't on your route, do not stop. Override if necessary. That station is not for you. Warning 4. If a passenger knocks on the cabin door and asks to be let in, ignore them. No matter what they say, no matter how much they beg, the cabin door stays locked. Warning 5. If you hear a child crying in the tunnels, do not investigate. Do not slow down. Children do not live in the tunnels. Warning 6. If your train loses power between stations and the emergency lights do not come on, do not open the cabin door. Do not leave your seat. Wait for the power to return. It always returns. Warning 7. If you see another train on the same track heading towards you, check your route display. If it shows the correct route, keep driving. The other train is not real. Warning 8. If you reach the end of your shift and the depot is empty, do not get out of the train. Wait for someone else to arrive. Do not wait alone. When I first read those warnings, I thought they were some kind of inside joke. Urban legends the older drivers told to freak out the new guys. But then I started working nights, and I realised every single driver I worked with had a copy of that list, and no one joked about it. For the first year, nothing happened. I drove my routes, I followed the schedule, I dealt with drunks and the delays and the occasional signal failure that left me sitting in a tunnel for 20 minutes, staring at the darkness outside the windscreen, waiting for the all clear. But nothing weird, nothing unexplainable. I started to think the warnings were just superstition, stories that had been built up over decades of bored drivers working late night shifts, their minds playing tricks on them in the dark. And then, 14 months into the job, I experienced warning 1. It was a Tuesday, just after 2 AM. I was heading southbound between Chalk Farm and Camden Town, running near empty. Scattered through the carriages behind me. The tunnel was dark, as always, just the twin beams of the train's headlights cutting through the black, reflecting off the curved walls and the tracks ahead. And then I saw him, a man, standing on the tracks, maybe 60 meters ahead. He was facing the train, just standing there, not moving, not trying to get off the tracks, just standing. My first instinct was to hit the brakes. My hand was already moving towards the emergency stop when I remembered warning 1. If you see someone standing on the tracks between stations, do not stop the train. Do not slow down. Do not look at their face. I kept my foot on the accelerator. The train didn't slow. The man didn't move. 50 meters, 40, 30. I wanted to close my eyes, wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, staring at him, watching as the train bore down on him at 50 miles per hour. 20 meters, 10, and then the headlights hit him fully, and I saw his face. It was wrong, not disfigured, not injured, just wrong. Like someone had drawn a face from memory and gotten all the proportions slightly off. The eyes too far apart, the mouth too wide, the nose too flat. The train hit him. There was no impact, no sound, no body on the tracks. He just vanished. One moment he was there, solid and real, and the next he was gone. I checked the CCTV feed from the front of the train when I reached Camden Town. Nothing. No one on the tracks, no body, no impact, just empty tunnel. I didn't report it. None of us do. Warning 2 happened about 6 months later. I was heading northbound on the Northern Line, just past King's Cross, running the late service towards High Barnet. It was nearly 1 a.m. The train was quiet, maybe a dozen passengers spread across 6 carriages. I was watching the tunnel ahead, half focused, half on autopilot, the way you do after hundreds of identical shifts, when the lights in the cabin flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. I remembered warning 2 immediately. If the lights in the cabin flicker 3 times in a row, check your mirrors immediately. We had 2 mirrors in the cabin, small, angled mirrors mounted on either side of the windscreen, designed to let us see down the length of the platform when we're pulling into the station. I glanced at the left mirror first. Nothing unusual, just the curve of the train, the windows of the first carriage glowing faintly in the tunnel darkness. Then I checked the right mirror. There was a woman standing in the first carriage, pressed up against the glass door that separated the carriage from the cabin, staring directly at me. I could see her clearly in the reflection. Pale face, dark hair, eyes wide and unblinking. She raised one hand and pressed it flat against the glass. I turned around, looked directly at the door. There was no one there. The first carriage was empty. I could see all the way to the back. Empty seats, flickering fluorescent lights, but no passengers. I looked back at the mirror. She was still there, still staring, still pressing her hand against the glass. I forced myself to look away, kept my eyes forward, focused on the tunnel ahead. Warning 2 said, if you see a passenger in the reflection that isn't there when you turn around, do not acknowledge them. I didn't look at the mirror again for the rest of the shift, but I could still feel her watching me. Warning 3 is the one that scares drivers the most, because it doesn't happen often, but when it does, you have seconds to make a decision, and if you make the wrong one, no one sees you again. It happened to me 9 months ago. I was running the southbound Northern Line, heading from Euston towards Moorgate on a freezing February night. The train was nearly empty, just 4 passengers in the entire 6-cabin train. I was approaching Euston, maybe 30 seconds out, when the signal changed. Red. Stop signal. That's normal. Signal change all the time. Delays, track work, traffic management. But then the route display in the cabin changed. It flickered once, then showed a station name I've never seen before. St. Julian's Cross. I stared at it. There is no station called St. Julian's Cross on the Northern Line. There's no station called St. Julian's Cross anywhere on the Underground. But the signal was telling me to stop there. I slowed the train, my hand hovering over the brake, my mind racing. And then I remembered warning 3. If you receive a signal to stop at a station that isn't on your route, do not stop. Override if necessary. That station is not for you. I switched the train to manual override. I ignored the stop signal, kept driving. The tunnel ahead began to change. The walls widened, the lighting shifted. No longer that harsh industrial fluorescence of the Underground, but something dimmer, older, yellowish like gaslight. And then I saw it. An old platform, Victorian, maybe older, tiled walls, cast iron benches, a sign hanging from the ceiling that read, in faded letters, St. Julian's Cross. There were people on the platform, dozens of them, standing perfectly still, facing the tracks, watching the train approach. They were all dressed in old clothes, long coats, hats, dresses with high collars, and they were all staring at me. I kept my foot down. The train didn't slow. As I passed the platform, I saw their faces, blank, expressionless, eyes wide and unblinking. And then one of them, a A man in a long black coat stepped forward off the platform onto the tracks. I flinched, expecting an impact, but there was nothing. The train passed through him like it was made of smoke. I looked in the rearview mirror. The platform was gone, just empty tunnel. When I reached Houston 30 seconds later, everything was normal. The route display showed the correct station. The signal was green. I checked the passenger carriages on CCTV. All 4 passengers were still there, sitting, scrolling on their phones, completely unaware of what just happened. I didn't report it. What would I even say? Warning 4 happened 3 months ago. It was a Saturday night, just after midnight. I was running a southbound service from Edgware towards Morden, and the train was packed. Weekend crowds heading home from nights out in the city. I just pulled out of Leicester Square when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp knocks on the cabin door. I froze. The cabin door is always locked during operation. Always. It's safety protocol. No passengers are allowed in the cabin while the train is moving. But someone was knocking. It came again, louder this time. I glanced at the CCTV monitor that shows the area just outside the cabin door. A man was standing there, middle-aged, grey suit, pale face. He knocked again, then leaned close to the small window in the door. "Please," he said, his voice muffled but clear. "Please let me in. There's something wrong with the passengers. They're not right. Please." I looked at the CCTV feed from the first carriage. The passengers looked normal, sitting, standing, talking, scrolling on their phones. Nothing unusual. The man knocked again. "Please, I'm begging you. They're not what they look like. Please let me in. I'm not safe out here." I remembered warning 4. If a passenger knocks on the cabin door and asks to be let in, ignore them. No matter what they say, no matter how much they beg, the cabin door stays locked. I kept my eyes forward. The man kept knocking. "Please, please, they're coming. I can see them. They know I know. Please." His voice was getting more frantic, more desperate. And then he screamed. A raw, terrible scream that echoed through the cabin even though the door was locked. I looked at the CCTV monitor. He was gone. The area outside the cabin door was empty. I checked the feed from the first carriage. The passengers were exactly as they had been, normal, unremarkable, except for one thing. Every single one of them was staring directly at the camera, unblinking, unmoving, staring. I looked away and didn't check the CCTV again until I reached the next station. When I did, the passengers were gone. All of them. The carriage was empty. Warning 5 happened 2 months ago. I was heading northbound on the Northern Line, somewhere between Borough and London Bridge, when I heard it. A child crying. Faint at first, barely audible over the sound of the train, but unmistakable. The child, sobbing. The sound was coming from the tunnel, from somewhere outside the train. I slowed slightly, instinct, not thinking, and I strained to listen. The crying got louder. It sounded young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. A little girl, I thought, sobbing, scared. And then I remembered warning 5. If you hear a child crying in the tunnels, do not investigate, do not slow down. Children do not live in the tunnels. I sped up, but the crying followed the train, matching its speed, staying just outside the cabin, like something was running alongside the train in the darkness. I looked outside the side window. I shouldn't have. There was something there, small, low to the ground, moving on all 4s, keeping pace with the train. It wasn't a child. It was shaped like a child. Head, arms, legs, but it moved wrong. Too fast, too smooth, like it was gliding. And then it looked up at me, and I saw its face. It wasn't a child's face. It was old, wizened, eyes too large and too dark, and it was smiling. I looked away and I just kept driving. The crying stopped when I reached London Bridge, but I can still hear it sometimes, in my sleep. Warning 6 happened 5 weeks ago. It was one that almost made me quit on the spot. I was running a late northbound service from Elephant and Castle towards Camden Town, just after 2 a.m. The train was nearly empty, maybe 3 passengers total. I was between King's Cross and Euston, deep in the tunnels, when the power cut out. Not a flicker, not a burnout, total loss of power. The cabin lights went out, the tunnel lights went out, the train's headlights went out. Everything, complete, total darkness. The train coasted for a few seconds, then came to a stop. I sat there in pitch black, my hands gripping the controls, my breath loud in my ears. Standard procedure for a power failure is to wait 30 seconds for the backup systems to kick in. If they don't, you radio control and report the outage. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The backup lights didn't come on. The emergency lighting in the tunnel didn't come on. It was still completely, utterly dark. I reached for the radio, and then I remembered warning 6. If your train loses power between stations and the emergency lights do not come on, do not open the cabin door, do not leave your seat, wait for the power to return. It always returns. I put the radio down, I stayed in my seat, and I waited. For the first minute, there was nothing, just silence and darkness, and then I heard it. Footsteps. Someone was walking through the tunnel, slow, deliberate, heavy boots on gravel, getting closer. The footsteps stopped right outside the cabin. I could hear breathing, low, ragged, and then something pressed against the cabin door. A hand, I think, flat against the glass of the small window. I couldn't see it, it was too dark, but I could feel it. A voice spoke, low, wet, like someone speaking through water. "Let me in!" I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. "I said let me in!" The door handle rattled, once, twice. And then the power came back, all at once. Lights, headlights, displays, everything. I looked at the window in the cabin door. There was a single handprint in the glass. Wet, dark, not water though, something thicker. I didn't open the door to check. I drove straight to the next station and reported a minor technical fault. They sent someone to clean the door. They didn't ask what the stain was. Warning 7 happened 3 weeks ago. I was heading southbound from High Barnet towards Morden, running just after 1 a.m. The train was empty except for a single passenger asleep in the third carriage. I was somewhere between East Finchley and Finchley Central when I saw the lights ahead. Train lights, headlights, coming towards me, on the same track. My stomach dropped. I hit the brakes instinctively, my mind already calculating impact speed, evacuation procedures, casualty numbers. But then I remembered warning 7. If you see another train on the same track heading towards you, check your route display. If it shows the correct route, keep driving. The other train is not real. I glanced down at the display. Southbound, Northern Line, correct route. I released the brakes, kept driving. The lights got closer. I could see the train now. Old, older than anything currently in service. Red and white livery, the kind they retired in the 1980s. It was speeding towards me. 50, 60 miles per hour. No way to avoid it. I gripped the controls and I kept driving. The trains rushed towards each other. 40 meters, 30, 20. I could see the driver in the other train's cabin. A man, grey hair, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. 10 meters, 5. Impact. Nothing. The other train passed through mine like it wasn't there. For just a split second, I was inside both trains at once, my cabin and his cabin overlapping, two realities occupying the same space. I saw him clearly, saw the terror on his face, saw the date on the display in his cabin, 14th of August, 1975, and then he was gone. I checked the mirrors. The tunnel behind me was empty. No train, no lights, just darkness. Warning 8 happened last week. It's the one that made me decide to quit. I finished my shift just after 6 AM, running the train back to the depot at Golders Green like I always do. The depot is normally busy at that time. Drivers finishing night shifts, engineers starting morning maintenance, cleaners prepping trains for the day. But when I pulled in, it was empty. Completely empty. No other trains, no staff, no lights in the office windows, just rows of empty tracks and the hum of the overhead power lines. I brought the train to a stop and sat there, staring out at the empty depot, my hand hovering over the door release, and then I remembered warning 8. If you reach the end of your shift and the depot is empty, do not get out of the train. Wait for someone else to arrive. Do not wait alone. I stayed in my seat. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15, and then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere outside the train. I looked outside the cabin window. There was someone walking between the tracks, a figure, tall, wearing a long coat, walking towards my train. I couldn't see his face. The depot lighting was too dim and they were too far away. But I could tell they were looking at me. They stopped about 10 meters from the front of the train, just stood there, staring. And then they raised one hand and beckoned. I didn't move. The figure stood there for another minute, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows between the trains. 5 minutes later, another train pulled into the depot. The driver, a guy named Marcus I worked with for years, got out and waved at me. "You coming, mate?" he called. I got out. The depot was suddenly full of people, staff, engineers, cleaners, like they'd been there the whole time. But I know they weren't. I'm handing in my resignation tomorrow. 7 years is long enough. I've followed the warnings. I've survived. But I don't think I can do it anymore. Because last night, I found something in my locker at the depot. A piece of paper, folded, placed carefully on top of my jacket. I unfolded it. Here was another warning, handwritten, same format as the others. Warning 9. If you've experienced all 8 warnings, you have been marked. The only way to break the pattern is to stop driving. If you do not stop, the next time you see one of them, they will not let you leave. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know how they knew, but I'm not taking any chances. If you ever find yourself working on the underground or any subway system and someone hands you a list of warnings, keep it, follow it, and if you start experiencing the things on that list, get out before it's too late. Because the tunnels remember, and once they know your name, they don't let go. Subscribe for more British Creepypasta stories